crime you see now, it's hard to even take its measure. It's not that I'm afraid of it, but I don't want to push my chips forward and go out and meet something I don't understand. A man would have to put his soul at hazard. He'd have to say, okay, I'll be part of this world.
Things separate from their stories have no meaning. They're only shapes of a certain size and color, a certain weight, and when their meaning becomes lost to us, they no longer even have a name. The story, on the other hand, can never be lost from its place in the world, for it is that place.
I think No Country for Old Men has benefited most from the return viewings. It's a film that increasingly gets deeper and deeper as I age, as I experience things in life, and I see what the movie's really about and how its structure relates to other structures, which is really important because the story has a very unorthodox way in the way it's told. Famously, the film kind of doesn't have an ending. The villain wins, but it's because of these things that differentiate it from traditional storytelling that I think it makes it probably the most pertinent film for our generation. And it sort of deals with the idea of losing the plot and losing faith and living in kind of what seems like a pointless world. Everything seems random. Why am I here if it's just to suffer? There's no way to win. Death's at every turn. And that is the framework, the dinner plate the movie is served on. And with that, something so dark, what it constructs on top of that, the beauty that you see is twice as potent. And what's really cool about reading the book is that with the changes that are made, it's all beats of the same song. So you have little added scenes in the book that fit right in the movie, and the added scenes in the movie fit right in the book, and the two together really tell a really comprehensive image. Anyways, so in the film, they inhabit a fallen world with no hope in sight. With the exception of our protagonists, Ed Tom, folks seem disconnected from the past, and with the loss of perspective, they have no vision for their own futures. People are not Christians, not Americans. They're beholden only to themselves, and the limit of just how far a man will go to serve himself is the same as his tolerance for depravity. According to Robert Putnam, perhaps the most important form of capital is social capital, because economic capital is based on trust, but a trusting society is vulnerable to Trojan horses, psychopaths, liars, etc. And when being honest and helpful towards others gets you bit, people begin to look out for themselves, and selfish behavior cascades. So while organized crime seems like it's likely threat of the film, really it's kind of like an onslaught of nihilism.
And this went on until, here I quote, neighbors were alerted when a man ran from the premises wearing only a dog collar. You can't make up such a thing as that. I dare you to even try.
You looked at your load lately? Oh, that is a damn outrage.
You gonna write me up for improperly secured load on me?
You get your ass out of here.
You see, in nihilism, objects collapse into their most base meaning. In a proper mindset, even something as simple as making breakfast is part of a set of rituals embedded within the deepest passion of Christ. Okay, I forgot to mention this. This is going to be very annoying to some people, but when I'm talking about how this structure differs from traditional film structures, it helps to talk about what a traditional story structure is. And the way I see it, the base of all story structure is the Christian one. And I know people are going to be like, oh, whatever, Christ, I don't believe in Christ. I don't really care. It's not the point. It's the ultimate hero story. In the hero story, someone goes into hell, comes back up, brings something up beautiful. In Christ, it's the ultimate version of that because he literally dies and then comes back. So you can't get further than that. So when I'm talking about how this film relates to story structure, I'm ultimately always talking about Christ. I'm sorry, if you don't like that, this isn't for you. But also, this is the way Cormac McCarthy intended it. I mean, he has a great quote himself.
The ugly fact is that books are made out of books. The novel depends for its own life on the novels that have been written.
He puts very plainly that all stories can only be interpreted in reference with other stories. Now, all stories are grounded in reality because, if you want to inhabit one of those characters and see what happens, does that actually make sense? Do those tunes fit the same noises that you heard when you listened to the character in the book or not? But Cormac McCarthy constantly, throughout No Country for Old Men and a lot of his novels, uses Christian imagery. He understands this. And so this is the way we're going to be doing this. So, anyways, so back. Even something as simple as making breakfast is part of a set of rituals embedded within the deepest passion of Christ. You're making breakfast so you can do your body good, so you can do your family good, so you can all go out throughout the day and do good. And that good will echo into eternity. And it's not really even just echoing. It's like, well, what is time? Time is relative. When you take a good action, it exists forever.
You don't start over. That's what it's about. Every step you take is forever. You can't make it go away. None of it. You understand what I'm saying? I think so. I know you don't, but let me try it one more time. You think when you wake up in the morning, yesterday don't count. But yesterday is all that does count. What else is there? Your life is made out of the days it's made of. Nothing else. You might think you could run away and change your name and I don't know what all. Start over. And then one morning you wake up and look at the ceiling and guess who's lying there?
A nihilistic person, most simply, does not have faith in their dreams. Instead of objects being seen as potential tools for the service of God, they become reduced. Breakfast is just matter that will be converted into energy, and love is just sex and chemistry. Notice that none of the meaning goes away, but it becomes chaotic. A plate of spaghetti still means eat, but, speaking of eating, and chili, but every object still serves its own purpose. It's a form of polytheism. And people's motivations become more base as a consequence. Okay, and some people will be like, okay, why are you saying it's polytheism? Well, back to the book. They actually even mention, towards the end of the book, Ed Tom asked another deputy.
Finally, I asked him if he knew who Mammon was. And he said, Mammon? Yes, Mammon. You mean like the god and Mammon? Yes, sir. Well, he said, I can't say I do. I know it's in the Bible. Is it the devil? I don't know. I'm gonna look it up. I got a feeling I ought to know who it is. He kindly smiled and said, You sound like he might be getting ready to take up the spare bedroom. Well, I said, in any case, I feel the need to familiarize myself with his habits.
And they don't really make much of it, but, Mammon is partly the spirit that everyone in this universe is worshipping. Mammon is what money is a derivative of. It's worshipping physical wealth, power, money. It's worshipping money, and that's a problem. So it's another god. But again, Mammon is just one of the many gods that people are worshipping in here.
You see, new ideas form in your mind by the same top-down, bottom-up processes that initiate minerals and form your body. Things and ideas can possess us in the same way that we possess our own cells. Think about that. That's weird.
And this is going to become interesting when we get to Anton. People are serving sex, power, money, and again, there's nothing wrong with valuing these things, but their value lies in the fact that they are ultimately tools for bringing about God's good into the world. They are not goals in of themselves, and if you try to chase any one of these to the end, you'll be disappointed to find that it's empty.
Llewellyn, I don't even want the money. I just want us to be back like it was. We will be. No, we won't. I've thought about it. It's a false god. Yeah, but it's real money.
To put this into finer terms, the drug cartels are a manifestation of this.
It's not even a law enforcement problem. I doubt if it ever was. There's always been narcotics, but people don't just up and decide to dope themselves for no reason. By the millions. I don't have no answer about that. In particular, I don't have no answer to take heart from. Sheriff, now, how come you let crime get so out of hand in your county? Sounded like a fair question, I reckon. Maybe it was a fair question. Anyway, I told her, I said, it starts when you begin to overlook bad manners. Anytime you quit hearing sir and ma'am, the end is pretty much in sight, I told her. I said, it reaches into every strata. You've heard about that, ain't you? Every strata? You finally get into a sort of breakdown of mercantile ethics that leaves people sitting out in the desert dead in their vehicles, and by then it's just too late. She gave me a kindly funny look. So the last thing I told her, and maybe I shouldn't have said it, I told her that you can't have a dope business without dopers. A lot of them are well-dressed and holding down good-paying jobs, too. I said, you might even know some yourself.
Those are people who are fine with making money, but at the expense of creating suffering and vice for their fellow man. But even further, It is the nihilism in society that makes the population more susceptible, and each individual serving ununified base meanings, being pulled in polytheism in a chaotic matter in all these different directions, instead of this one unifying force where everyone can kind of join together of the good, is in a strange way the same as everyone serving nothingness. Because infinite points serving different ends is the same as nothingness. And this understanding is reflected in the music, or lack thereof. Musical structure is similar to film structure. That's why they fit together so well. This should be obvious. You have background themes, beats playing against each other in a meaningful harmony, undertones, overtones that create meaningful arcs. You can use music to exemplify a chaotic scene in two ways. There's actually kind of a third way, it's like foreboding, but we'll just remove that for now. You can either remove it entirely.
Sure, that I'm coming, you motherfucker!
Or ramp it up until it becomes noise.
Open the door!
Errand boy.
Or do both, like the Insidious score. This honestly tends to work really well for horror movies because you're not really sure what's going on, there's no noise, you're in anticipation when you're looking in the dark, you don't know what's going to be there, and then pop, it comes up, you don't know what it is, and suddenly you hear all these crazy random noises, and once you actually know what the monster is, it becomes no longer scary. So it's that unspecified nature of the monster that makes it partly what it is. And often you kind of see this being used in films where either the music starts out chaotic when like a new piece of information is introduced, or it's just no sound. You're looking at it and you're like, what the hell? And then suddenly as the characters realize what's going on, the audiences realize what's going on, and the music will sort of ramp in and then kick in and then sort of direct the play.
They're going back to the Citadel. They know it's undefended.
The music kicks in, the plot kind of resets and further defines. So then what does it mean for a film to have no music entirely? It's conveying that they live in a chaotic world. So within a story structure, you can imagine that's the home, this is the desert. The movie kind of takes place in the desert the whole time. There's no, excuse me, you don't really feel safe when the movie starts, you don't really feel safe when the movie ends. It's always in that space. Normally in traditional film structure, you start off in home, go to dangerous place, and then arrive at a better home. Now, of course, I'm speaking relatively, because like it does start off with that. It starts off with Llewellyn in the predictable patterns of his day, feeling comfortable, and then he sees the outside thing that brings him into the story, and then it becomes all chaotic, and then it ends with, Ed Tom sort of back at home again as well. Everything slowly kind of resets, but not really completely. But again, I'm talking about relatively. And relatively speaking, the entire film takes place within a chaotic, weird, and dangerous, and meaningless place. And again, this is what it can kind of feel like if you're kind of, as Brad Pitt says, like the middle child of society.
We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no Great War, no Great Depression. Our Great War is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives.
So it's conveying that they live in a chaotic world, and it reflects the fact that the film can feel as though it's missing a climax. One of the threads is just dropped seemingly for no reason midway through. We're talking about Llewellyn's death. And if your friend was playing this as a song for you, you'd say it was a mistake. Back to that music analogy. The choice also gives credence to the idea of a dead god. You see, within a film, similar to like a narrator, what the music does, a narrator is like a perspective outside of all the perspectives in a film. And it unifies all the different scenes and everything. You know that you can trust that scene that didn't really seem like it meant anything. If there's a narrator in the film telling the story, with someone telling you a story, they're not going to tell you anything superfluous. So you have this sort of faith in the narrator that this is all self-contained, it all has a single purpose. And music is kind of analogous to that, because it's traditionally with music, it sort of continues through the scenes and through the different characters, and it doesn't really ever stop. It's sort of this entire meaningful structure that all the scenes are contained within. And actually, just the fact that a film actually has editing gives it this sort of, gives it that quality. but you can't remove editing. And honestly, if we're being really specific, the movie actually technically does have music as well. Again, we're speaking relatively, and a slight in some scenes I don't count as music. That's, we'll call it that. And what's really traumatic is that, if you're one of these old men who's in this universe who kind of still does hold on to this really kind of Christian, meaningful understanding that everything's going to happen for a purpose and for a reason, it's really shocking to your faith because no one else believes that. And, a lot of things that you've seen in your own life kind of go against that.
These people will kill him, Carla Jean. They won't quit.
He won't neither. He never does.
Bell nodded. He sipped his coffee. The face that lapped and shifted in the dark liquid of the cup seemed an omen of things to come. Things losing shape, taking you with them.
But there's one character in the film whose explicit beliefs actually match the outside world that we're seeing. And he has the most conviction of anyone else. It makes him absolutely terrifying. And that man is Anton Chigurh. Imagine that when Cain killed Abel, God remained silent. This is the best way I can describe Anton Chigurh. He never feels guilty for his killings, he never faces justice or law, he always gets what he wants. Anton's origins are obscure, but it seems as though he was smelts within this, nihilistic, hopeless world. He's the flip side of Ed Tom in that he's the only character not motivated by anything material. He has no regard for human life, however, and this lack of baggage makes him one of the most effectively lethal characters in film. If the god of this universe is uncaring, indifferent, unpredictable, and favors the powerful, then Anton is that man in the flesh. He is the physical manifestation of the Antichrist, and his almost supernatural abilities of stealth, almost like an apparition, give credence to this.
Let me ask you something. If the rule you followed brought you to this, of what use was the rule?
This line could be said to Christ on the cross, and it would fit. This line is exactly antagonistic to the principles of Christendom, and it is one of the central, if not the central principle of Anton's philosophy. You should not trust because you will be betrayed. He has a whole speech about how he doesn't understand how people can allow themselves to have these sorts of vulnerabilities, of having loved ones, of trusting people and relying on, people and needing people. These are all sorts of just, vulnerabilities, and really what you want in life is to be as efficient as possible.
Oh God, she said. Oh God. I'm sorry. She looked at him a final time. You don't have to, she said. You don't. You don't. He shook his head. You're asking that I make myself vulnerable, and that I can never do. I only have one way to live. It doesn't allow for special cases. A coin toss, perhaps, in this case to a small purpose. Most people don't believe there can be such a person. You can see what a problem that must be for them. How to prevail over which you refuse to acknowledge the existence of. Do you understand? When I came into your life was over. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And this is the end. You can say that things could have turned out differently, that there could have been some other way. But what does that mean? There is not some other way. There is this way. You're asking that I second say the world, do you see? Yes. I do. I truly do. Good. That's good. How did you find me? He said. What difference does that make? It makes a difference to me. You don't have to worry. Nobody else is coming. How do you know? Because I'm in charge of who is coming and who is not.
One of his weirder quirks is his worship of the coin. It's almost as if his entire dream and religious understanding has been compressed into that very small point. But to him, the worship of the coin is completely rational and efficient, because it's a reflection of the random and chance nihilistic world that they inhabit. It's chance that brings you into this world, it's chance that will take you out. And as driven as he was to get you Ellen, I bet he was kind of fine with the sort of random and anticlimactic way that he went out, because that's a climax for him. He's weird. He also has this really weird thing about honesty and truth and keeping his own life clean and ordered. But it's not for anything other than just himself. You know, like, he will keep his word and be completely consistent at the absolute destruction of everyone else. So he holds truth as a value, just not any good outside of his own self. He's almost like a black hole that's sucking everything down, because he wants to survive. And to survive, you have to make things predictable around you. It means you can't have people doing things that you don't like or don't really fuck with or don't understand. It just makes sense to kill them and act straight and tell them that you're going to do that.
Can you get those chicken grates out of the bed?
What are you talking about?
You know what I mean? And that's his thing. It's truth towards the worship of the self. And that's one of the reasons why I say it's the Antichrist, because Satan's main sin is putting himself above Christ, is being jealous above Christ. He's like, what? I'm the coolest angel. Fuck that guy. I got red hair. I mean, it's Milton's Satan. There's definitely no psychological thing happening right here. But yeah, it's his pride that puts himself above God. And it's the pride of Anton that puts himself above the whole society. He doesn't need them, so he believes. And he even constantly uses this language in the book. You know, he always says you people and you guys, and like he's completely separate from them. He actually does view himself as a god. I mean, he says that he's making himself in God's image in the book.
You gave your word to my husband to kill me? Yes. He's dead. My husband is dead. Yes. But I'm not. You don't owe nothing to dead people? Chigurh cocked his head slightly. No, he said. How can you? How can you not? They're dead. Yes, but my word is not dead. Nothing can change that. You can change it? I don't think so. Even a non-believer might find it useful to model himself after God. Very useful, in fact. You're just a blasphemer.
So at the end of the day, the villain wins, life is meaningless, and the only character with some wise words is an old forgotten man surrounded by cats and the odor of piss. The sheriff recounts a dream. In it, he loses something important that his father handed to him, society. Then he sees his dad as a young man, carrying a small white flame through a blizzard, then black. So, was it really all pointless? Or did we just miss the point? This actually leads us to the most meta element of the film. See, the positive meaning is not evident. Instead, it must be looked for, extrapolated, dreamed about, with only being given the most brief moments of hope.
Or not so much extrapolated, because if you're like me, the hopeful throughline of the film manifests itself self-evidently or subconsciously. I mean, maybe this means the film is some sort of, psychological ink blotch test, but I believe it's actually a testament to our ability to see hope even in the worst of situations.
The same challenge that has been given to Ed Tom, or anyone else in the real world that's caught in a similar place. And for the audience, the positive dreams of this universe are tethered to just one scene, and it also delivers a silent but fatal shock to the heart of Anton's philosophy. Anton is nothing without the grace of God. You see, this world, as we currently know it, is doomed. The new law of this moral wasteland is every man for himself. And even Anton, the most powerful and self-reliant character in the film, who's perfected selfishness to an almost meta degree, would be dead if not for these adolescents that offer to help, purely out of decency and faith in doing good. This good may be tempered given the context. For instance, the same situation occurs earlier in the film with much different consequences, and the kids are bickering over the money a moment later. But the film seems to be implying that if this good ever did happen to flicker out, not even Anton could survive. Metaphorically, a flood would come and everything would wash away for a new start, which does actually happen in history sometimes. And the fact that what little good is left in the society is what's holding it together should be kind of obvious. I mean, productive and destructive are practically the definitions of good and evil. One is serving creation, the other is serving nothing. And the film also shows that evil cannot sustain itself without the good. It's captured in a rather perverse and direct terms in Anton's action. You see, Anton is preying on people's kind and trusting nature throughout the film.
But the minute he runs into someone who's less than trusting, he hits a brick wall.
Now imagine if that's how those kids were acting. So in this context, Llewellyn's end is not so much of a random letdown, but a predictable tragedy of a man seeking a false treasure.
You want to drive out there?
Oh, that's all I had to look for, and it sounded like these old boys died of natural causes.
Well, how's that, Sheriff?
Natural to the line of work they was in.
Yes, sir.
It's not that he died that's the worst part. Lots of protagonists die, but rather what he died for. A bigger house, more property. He's not a bad man, but just of his time and misguided. He lived in vain, and he died in vain. And the directors show us this by not showing us this. But I think the dream actually takes us a step further. I don't think the world will meet a righteous end. Instead, I believe the flame will be rekindled by the man in Ed Tom's dream. The flame is an interesting symbol. It's something that is sort of central to humans. One of the things that makes fire so important is that it was the first thing that allowed us to travel from out of the jungle. Because we used to sleep inside of trees. You can only sleep inside of the ground if you want to move out into the savannah. Because there's so many dangerous creatures and predators and all that sorts of things. But once you have fire, that allows you to do that. And also allows you to cook and do all sorts of amazing things, which is probably one of the first few inventions, was probably like fire and then cooking and everything from there. But anyway, so the fire is kind of a weird symbol for the center of society. It's where all the light emanates. It's where all the understanding is. And it's very much like the center of tradition and culture. And that, well, for one, the fire, still to this day, I bet a lot of you guys have a fire under your TV, under your mantelpiece. It's the center of where the storytelling happens. So you'll sit around the fire and you guys talk and you have conversations and you illuminate the world with the stories. And something similar is that, when you go and take an adventure to go somewhere else, maybe you want to start a new camp, over the ridge or something like that, what you do is you take a piece of the center of the fire with you, but you also take the culture with you as tools, as clothing, as knowledge and protection on your guide, in order so you can see, in order what things are, and so you can live. And so, and then once you go to the location where you want to set up camp, you put the fire down, and it has the potential to spread and transform the land into, to spread and transform the land. That's really, I think that's kind of, it's a pretty nice analogy. And then catch and then spread to more people and illuminate the world. And you also have this weird thing that when you're standing at the center of the society, and then you can imagine there's like an imaginary pole that goes from the fire all the way up to the sky. There's a word for this, it's called the axis mundi. It's a very symbolic symbol. It's in the tree, it's in the fire, it's in the cross, and it's a representation of the center of the universe, where the universe is held up like a tent pole, essentially. You can stand there, and when you look up, this is kind of a pagan idea, but you're literally standing where the center of God is, and you're really standing where the center of the universe is, because, God is the center of the universe, and you're standing in the center of the universe, and all those things are right there. So all of this symbolic imagery is tied up with the image of him, carrying around the fire and setting up and making a new home somewhere, a new good home. And further, and this is sort of really direct on present, I realized earlier, they depict the flame being carried by the father in the body of the son. I mean, he says in his dream that now his father is a younger man than him. It's like a young man. It's the future son. He's riding past him. Riding past is in the future generation. It's his father's younger body running past him as a child in the future generation. This is a reference to Christ. It's a reference to the fact that who he's dreaming of is the Savior to come. Someone who will go out and establish a new good order in good creation by going into hell. And allied with this dream, we have the boys. Now, it probably won't be them, but we can look at this blooming good as tangible seeds of a dream. Maybe a child born into this world could have the cunning and youth of Llewellyn, but also the moral firmness of Ed Tom. The story this hero actually needs, a hero that we must have faith in, even when we struggle to see him. It seems to me that Ed Tom's prayers for intervention from God probably were answered, just not in a way that he was exactly ready.
Where you went out the back door of that house, there was a stone water trough in the weeds by the side of the house. A galvanized pipe come off the roof, and the trough stayed pretty much full. And I remember stopping there one time and squatting down and looking at it. I got to thinking about it. I don't know how long it had been there. 100 years? 200? You could see the chisel marks in the stone. It was hewed out of solid rock, and it was about 6 foot long, maybe 1.5 foot wide, and about that deep. Just chiseled out of rock. And I got to thinking about the man that had done that. That country had not had a time of peace much any length at all that I knew of. I've read a little of the history of it since, and I ain't sure it ever had one. But this man had sat down with a hammer and chisel and carved out a stone water trough to last 10,000 years. Why was that? What was it he had faith in? It wasn't that nothing would change, which is what you might think, I suppose. He had to have known better than that. I've thought about that a good deal. Thought about it after I left there with that house blown to pieces. I'm gonna say that water trough is still there yet. But it took something to move it, I can tell you that. So I think about him sitting there with his hammer and chisel, maybe just an hour or two after supper, I don't know. And I have to say the only thing I can think is that there was some sort of promise in his heart. And I don't have no intentions of carving a stone water trough, but I'd like to be able to make that kind of a promise. I think that's what I would like most of all.